one in the series, and I played the hell out of this one. I loved this more than I loved 3 at the time. 2 was always going to be my favourite, but yeah, I think Code Veronica was brilliant at the time. So yeah, and Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is another one. Don't have to say much about that one. My friend will hate me for not putting this in the top 3, and it was a close cut. But like I said, even though I love it and it's very stress inducing, and the scary evil moon face, I think, you know, can terrify you when you're younger. But yeah, I did enjoy it, but for me, like I said, it's not to as one of my favourites. You know, I even like Twilight Princess a bit more than I like this one. So if I'm going to be honest with myself on just standalone games and not games in the series, yeah, it just misses the mark for me. But you know, did it have fun, and is there you know, a lot of replayability, and there's, you know, masters of different masks and things like that, which is always fun. And I think there was Mario Mask, I think, if I remember right. So we'll get into my top 3. So my number 3 is The Sims, because love them or hate them, the original Sims really sort of, you know, I mean, started a flipping empire of games, and I know it's EA who sort of like destroyed them with expansion packs and all that, but the original Sims was very different, and it just sold like hotcakes because people, you know, this sort of like, you know, having a character and sort of that them playing out their life and sort of nudging them along the way and things like that was really cool. And yeah, it was just very unique, so it had to be on the top 3, because on standalone games I've sunk a lot more hours in that game. My number 2 is Jet Set Radio. Just for the art style is absolutely you know, absolutely stunning, you know, with this cel shaded, really colourful palette, and the music is awesome. The combat is challenging but fun, and yeah, it's a shame. I mean, there's games now which are being like, you know, using the art style and sort of being you know, either spiritual successors or sort of, you know, using elements from Jet Set Radio, but it's a shame they don't, you know, do anything with the license, because, you know, people who love the original like myself, you know, if you bought one like because that's the thing, graphically you don't have to do a great deal just to do a great remaster, or, you know, even a remake, because, you know, you know, this sort of style is still in fashion, and yeah, and you know, it was so smooth. It was very challenging with the more the further levels you've gone, the more tougher the police and stuff were trying to capture you and things like that. And yeah, it's bloody hard, but it was so much fun, and yeah, it will always be one of those like really great games in my mind. And the and number 1 is Deus Ex. For me, this, like I said, even though, you know, graphics and a lot of things don't hold up as well, what this game did with, you know, this sort of like, you know, the choices, the narratives, and what that sort of set up, you know, for further games in the series, and also, games which copied it as well. This sort of like cyberpunk style, futuristic sort of, having people who have sort of upgrades and sort of powers and things like that, to try and like save the world and stuff like that. And I remember that, even like at the end of the game, you had like choices to either sort of like turn everything off, and sort of have the world has no power whatsoever, or like I said, or that once I think that one system takes over everything, or things like that. So it was always built on choice, and the characters and everything else were really set up well. And yeah, so even though it is very rough around the edges nowadays, for what it did contribute to gaming and things like that, with the narrative choices and the art style and the sort of really like grim looking noir cyberpunk style, it's always going to be one of my favourites. So that's 2000. So number 3 is The Sims, number 2 is Jet Set Radio, and number 1 is Deus Ex. So that was 9 minutes for 1 year, so I better rush it up a bit, because that was very long explanation. So 2001, I'm just going to name them and then have a quick talk afterwards, because there is loads of great ones here. You've got Final Fantasy X, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Sonic Adventures 2, Virtua Fighter 4, Burnout, Devil May Cry, Max Payne, Red Faction, Serious Sam, Jak and Daxter, and SSX Tricky. I mean, my God, what a great list. There's even though I'm not a big fan of Sonic Adventures 2, I've got a friend who absolutely loves it. I think it's trash, but was very popular. You've got the starts of great series like Devil May Cry and Burnout. You've got, Burnout was epic, and it did spawn a lot of great games. Red Faction was very much in the sort of like style of like Half-Life, but it had the destructible areas and things like that, where you could sort of like damage the buildings and things like that, and blow up the walls and things like that. And it was at the time was something different. Serious Sam, just a simple sort of first person light shooter, but it just was wacky and was very challenging. And I always have a soft spot for that series. Jak and Daxter, same thing, great series. The first one is quite basic, but for the characters, the setup and things like that, it did a very good job. So of that list, like I said, another one I've got to mention as well. It's not in the top 3, but it could have been very easily. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. I know a lot of people hated it because they had the switch with Raiden instead of Solid Snake, but it's one of my favourites of the series because it's absolute batshit crazy. The characters are ridiculous. The story is more convoluted than ever, and I absolutely love it. And the combat was challenging, and I just love every part of it, and well, apart from when Raiden's naked and you can only do like cartwheels down the side and you have to hide. That wasn't so good, but the fact that, like I said, it turns out, you know, he was being manipulated and it was a system and things like that. And it was very sort of like philosophical, sort of, you know, talking about reality's existence and sort of media and how things portrayed and things like that. And it had everything, you know, political stance and things like that. So yeah, very sort of different layers, and I always absolutely love that game. So my top three. Number 3, SSX Tricky. If you've never played it, it is one of the best games. The music's awesome, and the fact that, like I said, when you get your combo meter, it plays the Run DMC. It's tricky, and it's just so much fun. The characters are ludicrous, and like I said, and the slopes and stuff. You know, it's just you do like tricks and stunts which defy reality, and it's like and I absolutely love it because it's not trying to be serious, and it's just fun with a great soundtrack, good I think original characters as well, and if you've never played it, I don't know why they don't bring that as a remaster, probably because of the musical license and stuff like that. But yeah, I love SSS Tricky. Number 2, Final Fantasy X. Same thing. A lot of the Final Fantasy series are the ones which people don't like as much, but like I said, I love 8 more than I did 7, even though I do love 7. And like I said, I just couldn't get into 9, but 10 I absolutely loved, and the characters, and yes, there is that ridiculous laughing moment, but the sort of the characters' interactions and the things like that, and sort of like the relationships and what they're trying to do and what they're going to sacrifice, they, you know, over the series of the game, even like characters they bring in later like Riku, they're all excellent, and you know, and there is really, you know, serious topics to talk about, sort of like, you know, religion and how that sort of can be manipulated and sort of used for power, and things like that, and sort of, you know, blind belief might not be a good thing. So yeah, and you know, there's lots of various things, and it's like most Final Fantasy games, challenging as hell, but like I said, the characters I think are superb. The, you know, the enemies, and like I said, and I think there is a genuine like love story in there as well, which don't seem sort of like roped in. So that's my number 2, and number 1, Max Payne. Even though, like I said, there was limitations what they could do graphically, that's why the main character, I think it was like a developer that just like they couldn't, I think they couldn't afford or be able to do the animations on the face, and it just had like an expression, and that was it for the character, and it was just so iconic. But what it did for the combat and the story about this tortured soul who's basically, you know, feeling, you know, basically, you know, hurting himself, you know, through, you know, drinking and pain meds and things like that to sort of, you know, over his loss and things like that. So there's things like grief, depression, things like that, and it's just, and it's in this style of this detective noir, and it's just, yeah, it's brilliant. It's another one, like I said, don't know what, well, know why, because, you know, but it's like, there really should be from the ground up remake of it, of the original. Even though, you know, there is some really disturbing points in it and things like that, but it's like, yeah, it's always going to be timeless to me, because it was one of the few times sort of, you know, there was like a trend of, you know, from like the Matrix of 99, you know, with that bullet time, this was really, I think, the best game which captured that. And it just, but it didn't seem like cheesy, and it felt with this sort of like, you know, really sort of depressing character, and this sort of really dark story, and it just, yeah, it just works so much as a game, and yeah, it's always going to be one of my favourites. So yeah, so that was no quicker. So yeah. So number 3 is SSX Tricky. Number 2, Final Fantasy X. And number 1, Max Payne for 2001. 2002, we have Ratchet and Clank, another great start of the series. Splinter Cell, didn't really play a great deal, so it's not in my top list. Sly Cooper, SOCOM, Elder Scrolls Morrowind, did play a hell of a lot of it. It's yeah, hasn't held up very well nowadays, but it was epic at the time, definitely. And Mafia. And my number 3 is Metroid Prime. Absolutely love this game, especially, you know, on the GameCube. It, you know, even though there was limitations on that sort of console, it played stuff like this absolutely amazing, and it was, yeah, not many games sort of like go from like a 2D space into like 3D so sort of comfortably, and this did, and like I said, and with the Metroid series, yeah, it just went up and up, and then, you know, it did peter out later, but for what I've been told, sort of the recent one, it's Dread, Metroid Dread, has sort of, you know, got it back on track, so, and that's really good, and the combat, the, you know, the story, but just the visuals were absolutely amazing, and the fact that, like I said, you know, with some of these things, like the fact that, like I say, you have these different abilities, you can go into a ball and things like that, it could be very cheesy. It didn't, because it does work well in this sci-fi sort of setting, and like I said, the gameplay was fluid, and yeah, and is absolutely one of my faves. Definitely need to play it again at some stage, because I do have GameCube, but I think I did sell my copy, but yeah, I'll have to put it on my list of ones I'll have to play. Number 2, GTA Vice City. I'm a bit up and down with Grand Theft Auto games. Sometimes I absolutely love them, and sometimes, like I said, it's all down to with the characters with me and things like that. And Vice City, you know, you had everything, and like I said, the setting was really cool, and the sort of you know, that the enemy was basically, you know, this corrupt cop, and it's like, yeah, voiced by Samuel L. Jackson, which was absolutely brilliant. And yeah, and just the stories, the characters that they built and things like that, it was very of the time, but yeah, it was, yeah, I did love this more than, I mean, it's same for like the actual characters in GTA 5, even though it's like turned into a monster thing with the online. I didn't like the characters in 5. I thought they were all unlikable, and I had very little to redeem. And some people's like, well, that's the point, and it's like, Yeah, but they're your protagonists. If you haven't got, you know, any sort of like arc or anything they progress to, then it's hard to back characters. But you know, there's people who absolutely love that. But yeah, I just didn't like it, and like I said, I actually preferred, you know, 4 over 5, even though it is a lot darker and a lot more sort of, you know, serious. But yeah, so but like I said, I do love Vice City. It's always going to be one of my favourites. And number 1 has to be Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. If anybody's spoken to me before, absolutely love Wind Waker. It's definitely one of the favourites. It had a lot of flack at the time because of the art style and things like that, but the combat and the characters and the art style is absolutely great. And the music, chef's kiss, honestly. It's like, and it's bloody challenging in points and things like that, and some of the you know, the temples or you know, and yes, there is like when you get the pieces, was it pieces of Triforce? I forget. I think it was, yeah. And they're all scattered at different parts of like this massive map. You know, some you have to fish out the ocean and things like that, and it's like, yeah, that is an obvious sort of padding, and it didn't need to happen, but the actual sort of, you know, the areas and things like that you went to, and also the fact when you go, you know, back to this sort of like part of Hyrule, and you get to sort of like, you know, fighting there later on and things like that. It's just like, it was done so well. It really was, and it was yeah, such a great game. And it's one of the few Legend of Zelda games I've actually finished. I didn't finish when I was younger because I think I played a hell of a lot of it, but never finished it. But I must have been about 8-9 years ago, something like that. I got it on GameCube again, and yeah, and I was like, I am finishing this. So I started again, got all the way through, and I actually completed it, and I was like so happy because it's like, you know, one of the few I've actually done. So yeah, so that's my top 3. So Metroid Prime, Vice City, and number 1 is Wind Waker. So we have 2003, Tony Hawk's Underground, Mario Kart Double Dash, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, Sonic Heroes, WWE SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain, Beyond Good and Evil, True Crime, Streets of LA, Call of Duty, Beautiful Joe, and Manhunt. Another great year for games of various different, you know, styles and yeah. So there's so much I could talk about these. I mean, Mario Kart Double Dash, you know, there's not many bad Mario Kart games. Well, I don't think there's any. Like I said, my number, I've got to mention about SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain. This was sort of like when arcade wrestling games was, I think, at their peak, you know, and when you had like, you know, character, I think you had like Rock, Mankind, Steve Austin and things like that. This was like the sort of, you know, the Attitude Era when things were really cool. So yeah, so my number 3 is Beyond Good and Evil. I think this game is, you know, I don't think it sold well when it originally came out, but it was so original and very interesting. You know, you had things like a photo mode, which we take for granted like nowadays. But you know, this combat was really cool. The characters, the relationships you had with other people and things like that. You know, it was simple, but it was really fun combat and was really fascinating. And it's a shame that the long-awaited sequel is in development hell, and it is broken the record for the longest time in development hell just to get a sequel. But it is still well loved. So definitely has to be in my top 3. So I'm just lost my train of thought because I've not numbered the list right. Yeah, so that's definitely number 3. Number 2 is Beautiful Joe. Very tough game, very unique. You know, you have this sort of like this lad basically. That was it. He was watching a movie and his girlfriend gets kidnapped and he gets like sucked into this movie. And he's basically he's very much in this like anime sort of comic book art style, and the fact that, like I said, you can slow down and speed up your combat, and like I said, and depending on, you know, what projectiles and what sort of abilities you've got and things like that, and the combat is really fun. I don't think I got very far on it, but it was very fascinating, and like I said, and I did really love the art style and the characters, and yeah, it was very good, but very hard. And number 1, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, has to be this. It's another one, not usually my sort of type of game, but the story, the characters, we wind in time, which, you know, has been used a lot since, but this game, you know, it had it all, and it was, you know, challenging combat but fluid combat, you know, and like I said, interesting characters and a great story, and that's all you need to be, you know, one of the best games. And the fact that, like I said, I think they're still trying to do a remake of it. Let's hope it comes out at some stage, because, like I said, from a ground up remake of the original, I would absolutely love, because, you know, I do think it's timeless. So 2004, we'll get straight into it. So my number 3 was Beyond Good and Evil, number 2 Beautiful Joe, and number 1 was Prince of Persia: Sands of Time for 2003. So 2004 is Gran Turismo 4, GTA San Andreas, Half-Life 2, Halo 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, another Prince of Persia game, Warrior Within, Fable, Far Cry, Killzone, SingStar, Red Dead Revolver, Doom 3, World of Warcraft. Like I said, these start getting really, really great. So you could pick any of these for sort of like your top 3. So I'm making a decision. I am changing my number 1. I don't usually do this, but yeah, I'm changing it offhand because I think another game deserves to be number 1 on that. What shall I make because number 2. No, I'll still keep that number 2. So yeah, so my number 3 is Half-Life 2. It's not in my highest regard because I don't think I played a massive amount of this because I never completed it, but I did love the world building. I was a massive fan of the original that I even played, like the spin-offs. And there was a weird one, I forgot what it called, Blue something, where you were like one of these security guards or something like that. I don't know, it was a very long time ago on the PC. But yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Half-Life, and yeah, and I think it deserves to be in the top 3. Number 2, I've just had a shuffle about, and that's GTA San Andreas. And I've just realised I've got my games mixed up. I was talking about San Andreas on the last one. I do apologise, and not Vice City. That's what I was getting mixed up on about. Because which one was Vice City? Was that the... yeah. So I'm getting mixed with 3 and Vice City now. But yeah, because that was the more colourful one. That was the one which had more of a gritty sort of story. So I do apologise about that, but yeah. So, but yeah, San Andreas is one of my favourites. Apart from those RC, one of the RC plane missions which can go to hell. But other than that, yeah, always love that game. And number 1 for me has to be Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Even though I do love Metal Gear Solid 2, the sort of like prequel to the first one, Snake Eater was excellent, and sort of, yeah, the protagonist, the antagonist, it was just done so well. And the fact that, like I said, it had really unique sort of, you see them in a lot in like RPGs, a lot of survival games where you sort of what you eat and you had to capture your own food. And what I loved about it, if you left your game for a while, your food would get rotten, which was really cool. And the fact that, like I said, if you got shot, you would have to, you have to bandage yourself. Well, remove the bullet, bandage yourself, and things like that. And especially if you had any broken bones and stuff like that. And it was like, yeah, and it was, and this backdrop of just surviving in this jungle with snakes and enemies and things like that, and it was very unique bosses as well, and the fact that, like I said, there's one of the bosses where you can just like skip like a week and you come back and the old man's just killed over. So, or you can sort of like snipe him before you even fight him. There's some very unique enemies and things like that, and yeah, I do think I saw in ways I love 3 more than I love the first one, and that's really difficult. And the 4th one, I think, wraps everything up, and I wasn't a big fan of the one after that, which Phantom Pain, because it was a bit of a mess. But yeah, so Snake Eater is definitely my number 1. So that is my first half. So I will be doing the rest at a later date. So my number ones for the moment is Deus Ex, Max Payne, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Prince of Persia Sands of Time, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. I think that's a good first 5 years. So hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, and I'll bring you part 2 very soon. Take care. Bye.